You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today it's May 3rd, 2021. Well, COVID taken its toll. It's changed things. It's changed medical care. It's changed business. It's changed your commute to work. It might have even eliminated it. And if you had as rotten a commute as I used to have when I lived in New York, maybe that's not such a bad thing. But there's pluses, there's minuses for sure. And we're going to talk about the health issues, what's going on here. Our good friend of the show, Dr. Elaina George, and you find her at drelainageorge.com, is with us now. We've been talking to Dr. George for years now about what's wrong with the medical system. I mean, Dr. George was doing telemedicine on me before we even knew it was telemedicine, but not really. But she's here with us now, and we'd like to hear your health issues, how things have changed for you. Why don't you send us an email? My personal address is kl@kerrylutz.com. Dr. George, it's so great to have you back on. It's been a while since we last talked. I can't wait to hear your perspective on things. How are things going? How is your practice overall?
Well, first, thank you for having me back on. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be with you. My practice is doing well, actually. And I think the COVID situation has been a wake-up call for the medical profession, for independent doctors like myself. And it's become, I think, even more important to be patient-centered and to have a personal touch and to be able to treat patients individually, not as a conveyor belt. I think people are now looking for that. They want time to be spent with their doctor, not just write a prescription and run out the door. And I'm seeing people who really want to fix the problem and no longer interested in taking medication and taking a holistic, natural approach. And I'm really happy to see that because I believe that that is the future of medicine. It's not just writing a prescription and maintaining and managing. It's now about fixing the problem so you can come out of the healthcare system.
Hey, and you make such a great point because I gotten into the keto diet recently, low carbohydrate diet, healthy fats, healthy foods, whole foods, and it's made such a difference. And I can see it objectively. It's made a difference when you look at my my numbers from my blood tests, blood work, and all that. Everything is down darn near close to normal. And just my overall feeling, well, I had COVID, and that set me off on a real search for better health because I realized that part of the reason I got it, or perhaps got it as badly as I got it, was that I wasn't as healthy as I wanted to think I was. And are you seeing that with a lot of patients coming in who had COVID or didn't have COVID, but have seen their friends, relatives get it, and now they're really focusing in on how do I truly improve my health so I can get off the pills? Because Big Pharma just wants to sell you pills for life. And they don't want to fix it. They just want to treat it. And are you seeing an awareness and an awakening of people about their health and why it's so important to you?
I think I am. And I certainly am taking a more active approach at expanding their knowledge base. You don't know what you don't know, And people, when they listen to the media, when they follow the typical pathway, they think a pill will fix everything. They think that you don't have to work, that there's no personal responsibility. And we have to change that, honestly, to taking control of our lives, of what we do, how we interact with each other, how we feel about ourselves. And you have to love yourself, Kerry, in order to take that step, to say, I'm going to take the forefront with this. I'm going to make active changes. I'm not just going to depend on 15 prescriptions. And the average person coming into a doctor's office is on multiple prescription drugs. And I'm seeing that they're sicker. And I've been saying this for years. If these drugs actually were the end all be all, we would be healthier as a population, not sicker. So it's now time for, if we really want to lower the cost of healthcare, if we really want to take down the disease profile and keep people from getting really sick if they unfortunately come down with COVID, then we're really going to have to change our mindset. Everything you put in your mouth actually matters. You can't just get away with drinking, soft drinks, tons of sugar, even if you work out. I'm finding out that personally that I have to go to another level. And everything I do has a plus and minus, and I have to be willing to be honest with myself and to take responsibility for bad choices and change them. Because the good news is your body is self-healing, honestly, if you get out of the way and let it do what it wants to do. And I think that's a jump for some patients, but I think it's a jump that once they come to it, they won't go back.
That's such a great point because the average person my age in their early 60s taking 6 or more medications. And my goal now is to get rid of all of them. I was taking 5, now I'm down to 4. Blood pressure comes down, I'll be down to 2. And really, we've been looking for the wrong things. For so many decades, we've been worried about high-fat diets and cutting the fat down. And in fact, that has had the opposite effect from my research, in that the less fat you eat, the more carbs you eat, the higher your blood sugar goes, and fatty liver disease, all these things that we're encountering because we've had this misplaced notion, this fat phobia, right? Mm-hmm. And it just shocked me. I've known for a long time that the conventional orthodoxy in medicine was wrong, that fat is not necessarily your enemy, but I didn't know how wrong it was, because carbs are the enemy and sugar, right? Sugar is basically poison to your body, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and type 2 diabetes is an explosion of undiagnosed patients. And you don't have to be overweight or heavy to have type 2 diabetes. You can look at your body. If you've got a larger waist, kind of heavy in the middle, you're at risk for type 2 diabetes and other medical problems like heart disease. And these are reversible if you stop doing the thing that gets you into trouble. I mean, if we could just clean up our food supply. I remember saying to myself when they started feeding cattle corn instead of letting them grass feed, I was saying to myself then, years ago, that I think the cholesterol is going to be a problem because what you eat. And if these guys at one point, they were getting candy. Remember when there was droughts out there? They were feeding them all sorts of things. Well, that affects us. And the soft drinks and these diet sodas with aspartame that, when it gets metabolized, it becomes formaldehyde, which is what you fix, bodies with when you go to the mortuary.
Fluid, yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing good about that, or it becomes wood alcohol. I mean, all sorts of things that we shouldn't be eating. Let's go back to basics. And you'll find that you don't crave these things. I'm sure now that you've changed how you eat, you don't crave sugar as much, probably at all anymore. You get satisfied with half of what you're eating and you're good for the whole day. Your mental focus is better. You're sleeping better at night. I'm an ENT and we see reflux as a major player in, I'd say, next to sinusitis is like the second diagnosis. People eating and going to sleep, picking up weight, and then it just goes off into the left, right? Sleep apnea, you name it. So again, let's start making some conscious choices and not living in fear. Because fear also makes you fat. Increases cortisol, it lowers your immune response. I mean, really, we need to go back to natural medicine. And I'm not against pharmaceuticals, but I just think they're way overused. And I remember, ages ago thinking about how they changed the parameters of what normal is. Cholesterol used to be over 250 was normal, or 250 and below. Now it's like 200. So what they've done is they've made all the parameters smaller, narrower, so you end up catching more people with a disease. And, what do you stand to gain? And you're going to be able to write a prescription for a pre-diabetic and a pre-hypertensive when you should be counseling them to not get it in the first place, But we have to want more for ourselves. Withdraw our consent from this system that's designed to keep us captive from cradle to grave. I'm done with it. And I'm not going to counsel my patients that there's only one way to do things.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like blood pressure, a couple of years ago, It was like if you were over 120 over 80, if you were 130 over 80, 140 over 90, no big deal, you were pre-hypertensive. Now they've redefined that. So the second you go over 120 over 80, you're on blood pressure medication, right?
Don't just survive, thrive. The Financial Survival Network.
Doré Copper Mining is a premier, near-term, high-grade copper and gold redevelopment opportunity with tremendous exploration potential only 14 kilometers from the town of Chibougamau in mine-friendly Quebec. Doré Copper is debt-free and owns a 2,700-ton-per-day mill with an 8-million-ton tailings facility ready to be used. There is already power to site, and it is accessible by paved highway and rail. Doré Copper aims to produce a profitable hub-and-spoke operation of over 100,000 gold equivalent ounces per year, or over 60 million pounds of copper equivalent by 2024. Because of the existing infrastructure and location, a low capex is anticipated to recommence production. Doré Copper trades under DCMC in Toronto and under DRCMF on the OTC. To learn more, go to dorecopper.com. That's dorecopper.com.
This is the Financial Survival Network. The information you need to thrive now more than ever.
Exactly. And they all have issues. There's no medication that doesn't have a side effect profile to it. But again, another thing I think there's a problem with healthcare right now is informed consent. We are not necessarily given informed consent because there's no time. If the average doctor visit is about 7 minutes with an MD, there's no way they're able to give you the ins and outs of a bag full of medication. And we now need to pull that back. And again, this is where conveyor belt medicine versus independent medicine is completely different. I spend an hour with my first patient, and I'm an ENT, and the average time is probably 10 or 15 minutes. And that means I have a chance to ask all the questions, get a history, get to know the patient, fine-tooth comb so you can start picking up things that are duplicates, that there's a problem, and it works. I don't have patients call me over and over for things because they didn't understand it. And if we could pull medicine back to that level, where you have time. That's the most valuable thing in medicine, and it's gone. Now you have all these extenders and people coming in to do bits and pieces of the exam. One takes the blood pressure, another takes the history, then the doctor walks in at the end and just looks it over. I mean, that's ridiculous. Hands-on medicine, and patients need to understand. If your doctor is telemedicine with you, they never met you, and they never examined you, that's not medicine.
Telemedicine, and that's one of the great hailed accomplishments of the whole COVID era is now you got telemedicine.
Well, I think of it as a conveyor belt for prescription, right? It's a direct prescription factory. Because what do? The 9 times out of 10, the telemedicine visit ends up in a prescription, doesn't it? Do you really need it? Do you need to spend more time? Is it something else going on, with your emotional connection to it? I mean, nobody knows. You're just too busy writing a script. And now, not to go off track a bit, but it's really interesting. But if I call in a prescription now, the pharmacist can't come to the phone because they're busy doing COVID vaccines. And I thought that was really fascinating. That's what they're interested in. It's not even speaking to the doctor anymore about prescription questions. It's fascinating how the system works. But my mantra has always been follow the money. And if you can pull yourself back to 1,000 feet and look at that from a big picture perspective, I think you really start to see how the system is designed and how it's working.
Yeah, and it's certainly not designed to benefit the patient, because basically for a drug company, they get you on one of their drugs and you're an annuity stream for life. And it could be tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're going to make off of you over your lifetime, which probably isn't going to be as long as it would have been otherwise.
Unfortunately, you're probably right. But again, there's no time frame on when you wake up and you decide to take your power back. I mean, you can be on these drugs for years, but you can make changes and have your system adapt, recover. I mean, there's no end to what the body can do. We've seen diagnoses that come in our office. Every doctor, I'm sure, has seen a diagnosis that was hopeless. And you take a different approach and you help the body help itself. And it's amazing what you can see when you have the time and the mindset to actually work. And I mean from the doctor side and the patient side. So I just want to give hope to the patients out there who may be in a situation where their doctor's not listening to them. They got their back typing on a computer. or the patient does do something natural and they poo-poo it, your job is to find someone who's going to work with you. Why do you keep going to the same physician practice and getting the same result and expecting things to change? You have to be the change. And I think, again, I'm all about follow the money. You stop going to these practices that just dole out and they stop seeing their patients, the volume drop, they're going to figure out why that is. And that raises the standard of healthcare. And that goes for every aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could not agree with you more. Well, the question is, has this COVID so-called pandemic become a wake-up call to the vast majority of people, or will it be soon? Because we're about to find out exactly how beneficial the mask mandate is, how beneficial the lockdowns were, if at all, and everything else that they've tried to do, social distancing, all these things. I think we're going to find out shortly how they really didn't help.
I think we're beginning to find it out. Despite all the censorship and suppression, it's coming out. No one can stop the truth. And I think we're seeing lines drawn within families, within businesses, within communities of who, wants to get the injection and those that don't. And I think everybody should have freedom of choice. I don't think there should be one size that fits all, especially since this is technically an experimental treatment option that's not approved by the FDA. And I don't know if you saw this, but the FDA head of the FDA, I guess about a week ago, and said that FDA will not approve any of the COVID vaccines because they're not proven to work well. Now, I think that was really interesting. I don't know if anybody saw that or if it was censored, but I took note of that.
Well, you're not supposed to say anything bad about the vaccines because there's such a wonderful work of technology here, rapid drug development. And whether they were called for or not, I don't know. But what did you think when you saw that Texas eliminated their mask mandates, all restrictions on business, everything else, and then the COVID rate went down? Did that surprise you?
Not at all. I mean, we're looking at the states that have not opened up yet, and their COVID rate has remained the same or gone up, and open states have plateaued and gone down for months now. It's not new. And I just, from a scientific standpoint, the size of the virus is smaller than the pores in a mask. So there's no way that it can stop it from getting through. And that's been shown over and over again. Just refuse to put that out on mainstream media, but you have to critically think and stop having people spoon feed you and stop having people tell you things when they may have a conflict of interest. That, to me, is probably one of the most unsettling things, that people making the pronouncements and have the power have a conflict of interest, stand to gain in some way from this, whether it's notoriety, whether it's money, whether it's power, I don't know, but it's not altruistic. I can't say that I feel that way.
Yeah, well, I read in China, there were 30 people that became billionaires as a result of COVID. And I don't know if people became billionaires in the U.S., but I'm sure there are tons of health-related people who really cashed in on this.
I wouldn't doubt that. But just not having everybody have all the information, informed consent comes into play again, where people need to understand the risks and benefits. Just being told that it's 99% effective, but not explaining really what that means is not right. If you don't understand that just because you make an antibody to something, does it mean that it's going to be effective at stopping you from getting it? That's not equal. It's not the same. Just like having a case of COVID doesn't equal death due to COVID. They're not the same. So if you still have to wear a mask and you still have to social distance after you've gotten the injection, does that mean that it's really working? Is that really what a vaccine is supposed to do? You have to think about that. It's like the goalpost keeps moving and it's just never stopping.
What about somebody like me who had COVID? I haven't seen any meaningful studies on the occurrence rate, but it appears to be extremely low. So why should people who had COVID be getting a vaccine?
That is an excellent question, which I ask myself all the time. As a kid, I'm sure you've had it. I had measles and mumps, and I still have antibody titers through the roof because I'm protected. And when the body naturally gets attacked by something and it's able to mount immune response, generally it's quite good. And it is it remembers. And even if you do get it again, it won't be as severe because the body already has a memory to re-up those cells so we can fight it. And, again, I'm not sure why we stopped testing as a goal test for antibodies to COVID. That would have been interesting because then you would have seen that, hey, person had it, they recovered from it, they actually should do quite well. And we probably would see a large prevalence, larger than we think, of people who actually had it and didn't know it and recovered. And I don't know why they need a vaccine, frankly, if you have a natural immunity. I've not really seen that in any other disease process, but that's a great question. And I wish they'd ask that. I wish they would do a study on it. I bet it would be very enlightening.
Yeah. And it's important to know because in a recent confrontation between Senator Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci, he said, Ron Paul said, this woman had the Spanish flu in 1917, and 90 years later, she still had immunity to it in her blood. And don't you think that's going to happen here? And what about why are you making people wear masks who've gotten these vaccines? What is the point of this? So, it's really kind of insane. I hope the country comes to its senses. It's been a further source of division. But you, Dr. George, are always a breath of fresh air. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Again, you find her at drelainageorge.com. And make sure you send us your emails. I'll forward them off to Dr. George. The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. And of course, sign up for our free newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Dr. George, always a pleasure, always enlightening. Thanks so much for coming on with us.
It's an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to do it again. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.